Next, I'd like to talk with you about outlining. I know this is a scary topic, especially to you pansters, but outlining is something we all have to consider to some degree. So I'm going to consider it now as an important topic when it comes to preparing to write. But what is outlining? It sometimes seems complicated to us, or that it's got to be some magical process that only the very best writers, the most disciplined people know. But really, all it is organizing your thoughts in preparation for writing. It's that simple. And it can be as formal or as informal as you like. If you're afraid of very formal processes, don't worry. I'm going to show you how to outline like a killer in just simple word. All writers need to perform some level of outlining. Even pansters need to have a general idea of where they're going, what characters they're using, and where their story takes place. My advice is keep it simple. And in this lecture, I'm going to show you how to keep it simple. Let's begin by looking at an outlining process. What do you do? Well, I like to outline on my computer, and I like to begin by brainstorming. What I do is I go into Word and I start throwing up sentences of things that have to do with my story. They generally fall into three separate bins as I'm beginning to organize those thoughts. The ideas come up of plot, basically what happens in my story, and then that naturally leads to character. Who is it that's doing it? And finally, where are the places and when are the times that these things take place? All of these put together are part of the brainstorming process. You throw these ideas and you start binning them. Let's talk in a little bit more detail now about plot outlining. You're outlining what happens in your story. And by outlining, I'm saying you're just writing simple sentences that say this happens, this happens, this happens. And you throw them all together and they become a chapter. Multiple chapters become a novel. Except that no matter how detailed your plot is, it's going to change when you begin writing. It always happens. You always think of something, you think of subplots. Sometimes you think of major plot changes after you start writing the story. Sometimes characters that you thought were going to be minor become major, and they need whole storylines. So don't strive for perfection. Get down what you can. Get down as many details as you can, and then get writing. And finally, group your scenes into chapters. That is if you're writing a novel. Now, I'd like to look at character. Now, you're obviously describing the physical characteristics of a character when you're outlining a character. You're giving them a name and so on, nationality, mannerisms and manners of speech that may derive from their nationality, actually. Reoccurring archetypes are often used in character development, such as the Cinderella character, the hero, the the wise old magician. You see these showing up over and over again in every genre of fiction. Who they are, where did they come from? Tell their backstory. Actually know something about your characters. It'll influence how they speak and how they act in your story. And in their story, you're going to be telling their emotional journey. So think about how your characters are going to evolve and how they're going to change emotionally through the story. Finally, consider character flaws. Characters with flaws are much more interesting than perfect characters. And I'm talking about things like they lie and they cheat and they steal. Think about even going so far as having an anti-hero like Heathcliff in Wuthering Heights. Um, Flawed characters are fascinating to readers. And finally, there's place. You need to consider not only the physical location of where your story is taking place, but also the time or era in which it's taking place. This is going to influence what people wear. It's going to actually influence the way that people speak as well. And finally, the culture and the environment. You need to describe them both or to know them both as parts of place. That's what we're talking about when we're gathering our place notes. Now, with having described more or less a process and the goals of outlining, I'd like to take some time to show you outlining using Microsoft Word. Okay, now what I want to show you is a quick and easy way to outline in Word. This doesn't take any special tools other than what you're already going to use to write your story. So let me go ahead and bring up Word. I've got an empty document here, and I'm going to show you from scratch how I would start outlining. The first thing I would do is enter the brainstorming area. But what I want to do is organize my brainstorming under plot, character, and place. Now, I want these to be major holders of information, so I'm going to make them each head ones. What that means is they are titles, and as titles they show up over here in my little navigation bar, and I can move to them quickly. Now let's put a plot element in here. Let's say our story. What is a plot element? What is our story about? Let's say our story has to do with time traveling pirates who invade modern day California. That's a great opening. So there we have a plot element. What about these pirates? We have surely a captain we need to describe, and probably a crew of various types. And where is this in California that they land? Let's say it's Santa Cruz, someplace I'm fairly familiar with and feel like I might be able to describe in some detail, and I would begin to describe it here. Okay, so here we have places, we have plot elements, we have character elements. We throw them all together. You begin to organize this information now. You begin to gather it together at yet another level. So let's say this is chapter 1. Let's say we're writing a novel, and we're going to call it, you give every chapter a name, whether you're going to use a name in the ultimate chapter headings or not. We're going to call this The Arrival. There we go. That's a nice dramatic name. And once again, since this becomes a major element, now we have chapter 1. And chapter 1, the arrival, shows over here. We can jump to it quickly. Now, the reason that this left-hand navigation pane becomes so important is that these plot outlines can become quite complicated. Let's look at one for a story that I worked on a plot outline with my wife on. It's a Butterscotch Jones story. Here you can see chapter 1, the crash, from Butterscotch Jones' perspective, and it has several elements, just as simple sentences of what happens in this chapter. This is a pretty detailed plot outline, and it goes on for several pages. Over here on the left, you get direct access to every chapter as it's being laid out, and you get to see what perspective that chapter is from. Then once you go to that chapter, let's say chapter 5, you get the details of what's in it. Just simple sentences. This is a simple way to outline. Well, that's plot. What about place and character? Well, those are usually put together in a thing called a Bible. Here's a Bible for Butterscotch Jones that my wife used very early, that describes various people that show up in the story. Here's some of the villains or would-be villains, and here's some of the places that things occur. So, organize your information, outline your information by first brainstorming into 3 major areas: plot, character, and place. Then begin to group those things together so that you can get descriptions of places where things occur. And you can get descriptions of characters. What are their foibles? What are their rough spots? What characteristics in their voice are you going to show in dialogue? And plot, you get a nice detailed plot outline that you can follow. This is usually a very simple and rudimentary way to outline, can be completed in a few days. And by the time you're done, you know exactly what to write. You know who's who, what's what, and where is where. I hope this helped to give you an idea of how to outline.